if not all, of the president's men have come under increasing pressure in connection with the ongoing federal and congressional Russian investigations. In his testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee today, Attorney General Jeff Sessions was extremely hesitant to say definitively whether Special Counsel Bob Mueller had interviewed or contacted him in connection with the probe. Here he goes.
Have you been interviewed or been requested to be interviewed by the special counsel, either in connection with Director Comey's firing, the Russian investigation, or your own contact with Russian officials?
Well, I'd be pleased to answer that. I'm not sure I should without clearing that with a special counsel. What do you think?
I'm just saying, have you been interviewed by them?
No.
Hasn't your office been contacted to request an interview with you by the special counsel? That's a yes or no.
Well, I don't think so.
You don't think so? Are you sure?
I don't recall that I have been contacted. My staff handed me a note that I have not been asked for an interview at this point.
Much like in June, Sessions also refused to answer any questions about his private conversations with President Trump. Well, this comes after Politico reported that former Press Secretary Sean Spicer was interviewed by Mueller's team yesterday. Spicer was grilled about the firing of former FBI Director James Comey and his statements regarding the firing, as well as about Trump's meetings with Russian officials. Well, that's a lot. Former Chief of Staff Reince Priebus was also interviewed last Friday in that case, and Corey Lewandowski met today with the staff of the Senate Intelligence Committee. I'm joined right now by the author of that story, Andy Carney of Politico. Charlie Savage is covering the Sessions hearing, of course, Sessions hearing for the New York Times. And Malcolm Nance, of course, MSNBC's analyst. Hold on, Malcolm, for a second. I want to go to Charlie about this Sessions thing. What's this Mealy the Mouse thing going on here? This mousy, gee whiz, cute. I mean, he's a grown-up man. Why can't he answer a question yes or no?
There were a lot of weird moments in this hearing, and surrounding the weirdness was an unwillingness to answer questions about his conversations with Mr. Trump, both about Russia and about other issues.
How about with Mueller?
So at first he didn't even want to say that. You get the sense of a man who's really being careful not to get tripped up. You know, he said this thing in his confirmation hearing about not having communications with Russians that has just really damaged his reputation when it turned out he had. And then he's, well, I didn't understand the question as to be what you were asking. And now he's just dancing around these things. And on top of that, refusing to say anything about topics like his conversations with the president surrounding the firing of Jim Comey, or about the attitude towards the Mueller investigation, or about whether it would be appropriate to preemptively pardon people who Mueller wants to talk to and derail that investigation. One of the interesting themes that emerged from this hearing was not just that he was refusing to answer questions, but that he was invoking the notion that this stuff might be covered by executive privilege over and over as the shield to not answer these questions. And Democrats, you could tell, were extremely frustrated by that because President Trump has not invoked executive privilege. They're saying he's stretching this doctrine way beyond the limits of where it can go.
You know, Malcolm, I've been doing a lot of reading about Roy Hoffa, the crooked labor leader of old days, the dirty old days with the Teamsters, and he never took the fifth. He just kept doing that kind of waddle, that constant waddle of, oh, I don't know what you mean, and maybe, I don't know, could be, I forgot, blah, blah, blah. What's he up to? He's the Attorney General of the United States, this guy. He's not some guy off the street that just got caught up in some sort of gang, what do you call it? I'm trying to think of something, just a man in the street interview. It's like he's behaving.
Well, I heard today that, you know, Sessions may have been playing around with the limitations of, you know, the questions so that he could avoid perjury. I mean, several times before, twice, it was brought out that he had actually said he had no contact with the Russians. And then he had incidental contact with the Russians. And now it was contact with the Russians, but it didn't involve me collaborating or, you know, colluding on the campaign. Those are really big loops to jump through when the question originally was, do you have any information or knowledge of this? I think he is very cognizant that the Mueller campaign is eventually going to come to him as a witness or as somebody, as a person of interest. And he just does not want to put himself out there. That's being said, he had an audience of one today. Trump wants to see him push back from these things, and he did a good job of saying, "I was offended. These things."
We have that. We have a tape of that. Let's take a look, if we can, at all the things that Sessions has said about his possible meetings with Russian Ambassador Kislyak. The Attorney General has exhibited a pattern of what I like to call rolling disclosure after the last 9 months. During his confirmation hearing in January, as you said, Malcolm, Sessions said at first that he had no communication with the Russians.
I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
I did not. That's pretty clear. Once his meetings with the Russian ambassador were revealed, however, by the press, Sessions said in March he said he never discussed the Trump campaign with the Russians.
I never had meetings with Russian operatives or Russian intermediaries about the Trump campaign.
And now let's watch what Sessions said today when asked if he had discussed the Trump campaign with Russian officials.
Have you discussed with him any policies or positions of the campaign or Trump presidency?
I'm not sure about that. I don't think there was any discussion about the details of the campaign, other than it could have been that in that meeting in my office or at the convention that some comment was made about what Trump's positions were. I think that's possible.
It's like we're sitting on a porch in Mayberry. It's like, okay, maybe, I don't know. He's under a probe here. This is serious business. Let's talk about Sean Spicer. What were they getting out of him? And what do you think they got out of Spicer in these interviews with him?
Well, it was a day-long thing, about 7 hours is what I was told. And they grilled him about the firing of the former FBI Director James Comey, his statements afterwards, the drafting of the Don Jr. statement about his meeting at Trump Tower with the Russian officials aboard Air Force One. And what else? There was a few other things that, and there was also some questions about the timeline surrounding Michael Flynn's exit.
Well, let's talk to both of you. Yanni, you start. Who's in the room when Trump's first president, first couple of months, when he's sitting around there, like politicians do? I've been with them. They sit, they're blue skying it. They're thinking about what they should do with it. They're thinking out loud, including about stuff that's tricky, like legal stuff. Who was in the room? Spicer wasn't in the room that much. Reince must have been in there a lot, but he shooed him out of the room when something tricky got going, remember?
Yeah.
He moved him out. Who is a trusted in-the-loop person?
Jared Kushner was in the room a lot. Yeah. Hope Hicks, who's now communications director, has been in the room since before there was a room, since before the campaign started. That's why I think that the Mueller's team is going to talk to Hope Hicks. They're going to talk to Don McGahn. Those interviews are probably going to be next month. I think those will potentially be more interesting than Spicer, because for the same reason that Spicer's no longer in his job now is why he might not be the most important witness, and that he was not an inside player the whole time.
This whole thing revolves, I think, about obstruction of justice in the White House. And the question is, I think the cardinal question is, did Trump, and this goes way back to his original sin of firing Comey, did he fire Comey to protect himself from legitimate prosecution? And now, again today, he's attacking Comey, saying he was looking out for Hillary Clinton. He was a partisan. Charlie, why is he doing that? Why is he showing, again, motive, why he would want to get rid of Comey?
I mean, it's interesting in many ways that Trump keeps returning to Clinton as if he's still in the campaign of 2016.
Or returning to the scene of the crime.
Well, I think that he's reminding his base that or the Republicans, normal Republicans who might be frustrated with all his antics, that the alternative is a Hillary Clinton presidency. He needs that foil to keep people in line. And he just constantly returns to that theme as if we're still in last year and these issues still matter, which they don't, except for this purpose.
Malcolm, I feel like I'm sitting in your study somewhere and hearing your casual remarks to all this. And tell me what you were nodding about or concerned there. What do you make of all this we've been hearing? What do you think he's up to with going after Comey again, claiming that Comey's a partisan?
Well, I think he's afraid. And it's very patently clear that he's afraid. Bringing Spicer in and bringing Priebus in sets up two sets of guardrails that can only channel Trump in one direction. They are going to give up the casual information that the chief of staff would know before he has those closed-door boss Tweed-like sessions with his gang of four, right? The people who he is most concerned with. Mueller is going to want to know every witness that he can bring in that will show the pathway right up to where obstruction was done. And if Spicer has no information about that, he will have all the information about what went on in that hallway right up to there, or on Air Force One right up to the minute that he was shut out. And that's where, Mueller will have the 3 or 4 people that were in the room that could have had some form of, discussion. He'll have them in a box at that point.
You're thinking like I am. Thank you so much, sir. Andy Carney, of course, Charlie Savage, thanks for your reporting here. It helps so much. And Malcolm Nance is always up next.
Doing that with a special counsel. What do you think?
I'm just have you been interviewed by them?
No.
Hasn't your office been contacted to request an interview with you by the special counsel? That's a yes or no.
Well, I don't.
Private conversations with President Trump. Well, this comes after Politico reported that former Press Secretary Sean Spicer was interviewed by Mueller's team yesterday. Spicer was grilled about the firing of former FBI Director James Comey and his statements regarding the firing, as well as about Trump's meetings with Russian officials. Well, that's a lot. Former Chief of Staff Reince Priebus was also interviewed. If not all of the president's men have come under increasing pressure in connection with the ongoing federal and congressional Russian investigations. In his testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee today, Attorney General Jeff Sessions was extremely hesitant to say definitively whether Special Counsel Bob Mueller had interviewed or contacted him in connection with the probe. Here he goes.
Have you been interviewed or been requested to be interviewed by the special counsel, either in connection with Director Comey's firing, the Russian investigation, or your own contact with Russian officials?
Well, I'd be pleased to answer that. I'm not sure I should without clear. I don't think so.
You don't think so? Are you sure?
I don't recall that I have been contacted. My staff handed me a note that I have not been asked for an interview at this point.
Much like in June, Sessions also refused to answer any questions about his